The review of food science begins with fruits and vegetables. Most vegetables and fruits are high in water content, low in protein, and low in fat. They provide both digestible and indigestible carbohydrates. They are important sources of minerals and certain vitamins, especially A and C. Note, the crispness of fruits and vegetables depends mainly on osmotic pressure within water-filled vacuoles. You may see a cook soaking a rather sad-looking stalk of celery in ice water. The hope is that the cells will pull in water, toughen up, and improve the crispness of the vegetable. Soy protein is unusually complete for a plant protein. Methionine is the limiting amino acid. After soybeans have been dehulled, the oil is extracted. The remaining portion is soy flour with a protein content of about 50%. Soy protein concentrates contain about 70% protein. Soy protein isolates are highly concentrated, up to 95% protein. Textured vegetable protein is the end product of a series of steps producing fibers from soybeans. The chemical changes that occur during ripening are due to enzymes. Starch changes to sugar. Note, ethylene gas is used to accelerate the ripening of fruits during storage. Although most produce can be stored in the refrigerator, avocados, bananas, pears, and tomatoes ripen best at room temperature. Note, berries and mushrooms should be washed just before serving. Berries are very perishable. If you wash them in the morning to be served with dinner, by dinner time you may have raspberry mush. The berries absorb water and soon fall apart. Fruits low in ascorbic acid darken rapidly when cut due to enzymatic action. To prevent discoloration, dip them in an acidic solution. An acid prevents enzymatic oxidation. When a sweetener is added to the liquid of a packing juice, the density of the syrup is expressed as a percentage by weight of sucrose. It is measured by a Brix hydrometer. A close correlation exists between the retention of vitamins in fresh fruit and vegetables and the retention of their color, texture, and flavor. Green pigments are due to chlorophyll. They are insoluble in water. When heated in the acid liberated from vegetables during cooking, chlorophyll is chemically changed to pheophytin. This reflects light differently, giving off an olive green color. This is what happens to green beans sitting on the steam table for long periods of time. If baking soda is added, the green vegetables turn a bright green. This is an alkaline reaction forming chlorophyllin. There are several adverse side effects. Alkalinity softens cellulose, so the vegetables are mushy, and water-soluble vitamins are lost in an alkaline solution. Note, an acid reaction forms pheophytin. An alkaline reaction forms chlorophyllin. Try to avoid both by cooking the vegetable for a short time and serve quickly. Yellow and orange pigments are due to carotenoids. They are insoluble in water. Note, there is very little effect on these pigments in either an acid or an alkaline solution. Note, the phytochemical lycopene contributes to the red color in tomatoes and watermelon. It serves as an antioxidant. Flavonoids include anthocyanins and anthocyanthins. The red, blue, and purple pigments are due to anthocyanins. They are soluble in water, turn bright red in an acid solution, and bluish in an alkaline solution. white pigments are due to anthocyanins. They are soluble in water, colorless when slightly acidic, and yellow in an alkaline solution. Note onions may turn yellow when cooked in an aluminum pan. The major grades of canned fruits and vegetables and fresh produce are listed. Note the grades and that grading is done by the USDA. During the storage of potatoes, starch changes to sugar. So when old potatoes are used in cooking, the product will be sweet, mushy, and will cook to a darker brown. Vegetables should be cooked in minimum amounts of water for short periods of time to preserve nutrients. Cooking with a lid on is advisable unless otherwise indicated. Acidic vegetables that require longer cooking times should be prepared in a larger amount of water and without a lid. Note the cooking times for frozen vegetables are shorter than for fresh vegetables because the blanching and freezing processes makes them more tender. Blanching is immersion in boiling water than cold water. Note the suggestions for cooking cabbage. Looking at the information on can sizes, note the number 10 can. Next, we will review meat. A sheet of connective tissue binds the muscle fibers into bundles. Connective tissue has two proteins. Note, when heated, collagen is hydrolyzed to gelatin and softens. But elastin is resistant to change by heat or acid, so there is very little change in cooking. The finish of meat refers to the amount of fat cover on the carcass. The shape of the bone identifies the cut of meat. Under nutritive value, note pork is a good source of thiamine. Note the calcium content is high in fish canned with its bones. Textured vegetable protein fibers can be fabricated into simulated meat products. Imitation bacon bits are an example. Also, by mixing some TVP with ground meats, you can feed more people, reducing costs. The added soy protein also improves juiciness because of its water content. The pigment myoglobin contributes to the color of meat. In freshly cut meat, myoglobin combines with oxygen to give a bright red pigment. It later browns with further oxidation. If this oxidation continues, a number of greenish pigments may be produced. Note, this is due to further oxidation of myoglobin. When meat is aged, it is held in cold storage. Aging increases the tenderness. The change in muscle protein is brought about by enzymes, which increase the water-holding capacity of the muscle. And acid and salt also increase tenderness by increasing the water-holding capacity of the muscle. Note, vacuum-packaged meat is anaerobic. This extends the life of the meat. Note the USDA inspects and grades meat at slaughter. The inspection is mandatory and assures the consumer the meat comes from a healthy animal. Note the grades of meat. When ordering wholesale cuts of meat, the specification uses a numbering system. Note the cut of meat determines the method of cooking. The most tender cuts come from the least used muscles near the backbone. The least tender cuts come from the most used muscles. Note the cookery principles for meat and the safe minimum internal temperatures. As meat cooks, the protein coagulates and the collagen hydrolyzes to gelatin. Tough cuts need to be cooked well done. They have more collagen, which needs additional cooking time. Increase the tenderness of meat by adding vinegar. This lowers the pH and increases the water holding capacity of the meat. This is why marinades have vinegar. Note, cured meats are pink from the nitrites, which are added to inhibit botulism. Dry heat methods are used for the tender cuts. They have less collagen, so need less time to soften. Frying is dry heat cooking. A desirable property of fat used in cooking is a high smoke point. This refers to the temperature to which you can heat the fat before your kitchen fills with smoke. The smoke point should be above 400 degrees. Broiling and roasting are also dry heat methods. Note, carryover cooking raises the internal temperature. Roasts should be allowed to stand 30 minutes before carving. Moist heat is used for the less tender cuts with more connective tissue, like bottom round. Note, cook bottom round in water for several hours. Note, braising is a moist heat method. Certain proteolytic enzymes can be used to increase the tenderness of less tender cuts of meat. Fish is more perishable than meat, so it is stored at a lower temperature. Both dry and moist heat methods can be used. Note, fresh fish should be received with bright red gills, bright shiny skin, with firm flesh that springs back when touched. If it has dull and gray gills, with cloudy, red-rimmed, sunken eyes, and a soft texture leaving an imprint when pressed, reject it. Surimi is purified and frozen minced fish containing a preservative. It is used in making structured seafood products like crab and shrimp analogs. Important features of the egg are listed. Egg yolk is a naturally occurring oil-in-water emulsion. Note, the yolk is more concentrated than the white. It has more protein by weight. The color of the yolk depends upon pigments in the feed of the chicken. Note, eggs are graded by candling. Fresh eggs should be stored in the refrigerator. A fresh egg will sink to the bottom in a pan of cold water and has a dull, rough shell. If it floats to the top, the shell has become porous with age, increasing the airspace inside. Because of their many important functions, eggs are widely used in cookery. When eggs are heated, the proteins coagulate. This is what sets a custard. If cooked at too high a temperature or too low a temperature for too long a time, syneresis occurs. The protein network contracts and squeezes out the liquid, leaving a tough, solid protein mass. It results in a tough, watery egg. Syneresis is also called weeping. Eggs also serve as leavening agents. Their effectiveness depends upon the amount of air beaten in and retained. When an egg white foam is heated, the air bubbles expand, the egg white stretches, and the protein coagulates to give a light, porous structure. Note, adding an acid, like cream of tartar, will stiffen the egg white foam. The acid tenderizes the egg protein so it extends more easily. Egg white foams are compared by measuring specific gravity. This is a measure of the relative density of a substance in relation to that of water. Note, Egg whites at room temperature whip more quickly and yield a larger volume due to lower surface tension. Sugar also stabilizes an egg white foam. Egg yolk yields a stiffer, more stable emulsion than egg white because it has more protein by weight. Lecithin is the key compound responsible for the remarkable ability of egg yolk to act as an emulsifying agent. Mayonnaise is an example of a food emulsion stabilized by egg yolk. Eggs can be cooked in water or dry heat. Salt or vinegar improves the shape of the egg when poached or coddled by hastening coagulation. If the egg is overcooked or allowed to cool slowly, the surface of the yolk may turn green. This is due to ferrous sulfide. Note the information on custards. The larger the percent sag, the more tender the gel. Percent sag is an objective measure of custard quality. The more tender the gel, the more it will sag or bend in when pressure is applied to the surface. If the custard is tough and overcooked, the surface will not sag but may crack open with pressure. Note, when egg substitutes are used in recipes, they produce different colors and flavors than when using fresh eggs. If eggs are stored for a long time, there are many adverse side effects. Note, they lose carbon dioxide, becoming more alkaline. The two basic milk proteins are casein and the proteins in whey. Whey is the liquid that drains from the curd of clotted milk. It has lactose, proteins, water-soluble vitamins, and some minerals. Casein is the collective name for milk proteins precipitated at a pH of 4.6. It forms a soft curd. The different types of milk are listed. Note, buttermilk is produced from a skimmed or partly skimmed milk. It is made by adding lactic acid bacteria. Note, when using buttermilk in a recipe in place of regular milk, increase the baking soda. Note, acidophilus milk has less lactose. Kefir is fermented milk. When milk is heated, note the whey protein precipitates out. This forms a film on the surface or on the sides of the pan. To prevent the film, beat the liquid or heat it over water. Note an acid will precipitate the casein in milk. Note, butter and margarine are 80% fat. Note, butter turns rancid as it takes up oxygen, releasing hydrogen. Note which creams have the most fat. Cheese is made by warming milk and adding a lactic acid-producing bacteria. Then rennet is added, which coagulates the casein and forms a curd. The curd is then separated from the liquid or whey portion. Processed cheese is a blend of several natural cheeses mixed with an emulsifier. Note, disodium phosphate prevents fat separation and adds smoothness, so processed cheese is better for cooking. When cooking with cheese, cook for short periods of time at moderate temperatures. Cereal grains have a centrally located starchy endosperm rich in protein, a protective outer layer of hull and bran, and an embryo or germ located near the bottom. Note, quick cooking cereals have disodium phosphate added. This makes them more alkaline, causing the particles to swell faster and cook quickly. Low sodium patients should avoid quick cooking cereals. Note the differences between the types of flours. Both pastry and cake flours are made from soft wheat. When making pie, if pastry flour is not available, cake flour is best. If that is not an option, use all-purpose flour. Note that bread flour has the most protein, cake flour the least protein. Durum wheat is used for pasta. It has a high gluten content, so products are flexible after cooking. Note, when cooking rice, use an amount of water that will be absorbed during cooking. Next, we will review the functions of the ingredients in a baked flour mixture. The gluten in the flour gives it elastic properties. The gluten is produced when gliadin and glutenin are hydrated and mixed together. The strength of the flour describes its capacity to retain leavening. This depends on the quality of the gluten. Bread flour is strong. Cake flour is weak. Note, adding bran to a flour mixture decreases the volume of the end product. Bran is heavy, weighing down the structure. To compensate, add additional flour to provide more gluten and more liquid to hydrate the flour. So compensation for bran is additional flour and liquid. Liquids in a flour mixture start the development of gluten, the action of chemical leavening, and the gelatinization of starch. Leavening is created by steam, air, or carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide can be formed either by the action of yeast on sugar or by the action of acid on baking soda. Baking soda forms carbon dioxide gas much more quickly in doughs than does yeast. Acids that can be used are sour milk, molasses, and cream of tartar. Baking powder is a mixture of baking soda, a dry acid, and cornstarch, so all baking powders have baking soda. Note, old baking powder becomes more alkaline, causing a loss of thiamine in baked goods. Salt in a flour mixture adds flavor. In yeast breads, it keeps the dough from becoming sticky when needed. Too much salt interferes with the growth of yeast. Egg protein coagulates, stabilizing the structure. It retains the leavening agent, distributes the shortening, and adds color and flavor. Fat contributes to tenderness. It coats the gluten particles, keeping them from becoming one continuous mass, resulting in a tender product. Note, sugar modifies the texture of a flour mixture. It is hygroscopic, absorbing some of the water that gluten needs for development. Too much sugar results in coarse cells, thick walls, a shiny crust, and a crumbly product. Sugar adds flavor and browning. When using sweet and low in a recipe in place of sugar, use half the amount. A quick bread is a flour mixture leavened quickly by steam, air, or chemical agents, not yeast. Muffins, biscuits, and popovers are quick breads. Note, the basic ingredients that provide the structure are egg and flour. The muffin method of mixing consists of mixing liquid items together and adding them all at once to the dry ingredients. Mix the batter just enough to dampen, not enough to produce a smooth batter. Note, excess mixing results in a loss of carbon dioxide, overdeveloped gluten, and tunnels throughout the product. The conventional method of mixing cakes is to cream the fat with sugar and add the egg. Then add the sifted dry ingredients in portions, alternating with portions of milk. Shortened cakes contain a comparatively high amount of fat. Layer cakes are leavened with baking powder as the source of carbon dioxide. Pound cakes, which are relatively compact, are leavened only by the air creamed into them and by some steam generated during baking. Note, rich cakes have higher amounts of fat, sugar, and eggs. This increases their keeping quality. Foam cakes, which are dependent on an egg foam for volume, use air as leavening. Angel cakes are made with an egg white foam. Sponge cakes contain both a yolk foam and a white foam. Chiffon cakes use liquid yolks and a white foam. They also have baking powder as a leavening agent and oil to tenderize. Alterations in the amount of sugar in a cake can cause many variations. The more sugar, the more time is needed to reach the elevated coagulated temperature of the gluten. As the content of sugar is increased, the volume of the cake increases, up to the point where the volume is so great and the gluten so weak that the gluten strands snap and the cake falls in the center. Please review the other causes of variations in cakes. Cookies are considered a modified shortened cake, usually higher in fat and lower in sugar and liquid. Note pastry has 4 ingredients: flour, fat, liquid, and salt. Lard and vegetable oil are both 100% fat, so you can substitute one for the other in equal amounts. Note, if you substitute butter or margarine for lard or oil, because they are only 80% fat, you need to use more. Note the difference between tender and flaky pie crusts. The tenderness in pie crust is enhanced by using oil, soft fat, or fat cut into very small pieces. Flakiness is promoted by leaving the fat in coarse particles. The fat in pieces melts and flows, leaving a space where steam collects, pushing upward against the cell. The cell is locked into that extended position, resulting in a flaky pastry. Baked flour mixtures are classified as batters and doughs according to the proportion of flour to liquid. Breads are usually made using the straight dough method. All of the ingredients are mixed and kneaded prior to fermentation and proofing. Commercial bakeries often use the sponge method. The liquid, yeast, and part of the flour are mixed and allowed to ferment until it becomes spongy. Then the remaining ingredients are mixed in. This shortens the proofing time. Note, proofing refers to the final rising of the dough in the pan. Note, strong flours like bread flour, high in protein, are needed for this method. Note, the continuous bread-making process is also a commercial method. It substitutes mechanical energy for traditional bulk fermentation, reducing the time needed for traditional fermentation. When baking at high altitudes, atmospheric pressure is reduced. Gas expands more readily than at lower altitudes. Steam is formed earlier as water boils at a lower temperature than at sea level. This means a cake may expand excessively in the early baking period, before the heat of the oven has coagulated the proteins and gelatinized the starch enough to stabilize the structure. To correct this, decrease the amount of baking powder and increase the liquid. Starch is composed of 2 molecules, amylose and amylopectin. Amylose is responsible for gelation in cooled cooked pastes. Waxy starches have no amylose and are non-gelling. Thus, they are stable to the freezing and thawing processes, so are widely used in frozen foods. The thickening ability of starches from different sources varies. Note, potato starch is far more effective than others, so you can use the smallest amount of potato starch to thicken a mixture. Wheat starch is the least effective thickener. Gelatinization is the swelling that occurs when starch is heated in water close to the boiling point. Sugar plays an important role in starch-thickened recipes. Sugar competes with starch for the water needed for gelatinization. Sugar also increases translucency and reduces viscosity and gel strength. In a starch-thickened pie filling, if too much sugar is used, the consistency may be thin because the water needed to dissolve the excess sugar is not available for the gelatinization of the starch. This decreases the swelling of starch granules. Acids like lemon juice and heat cause a reaction that breaks down starch into smaller molecules. The molecules move freely in the paste, resulting in a thinner paste. Whenever possible, an acid should be added after gelatinization is complete. Retrogradation occurs in starches with a high proportion of amylose. After a starch paste has been cooled, it may become less soluble and recrystallize to form a solid or rigid gel. The hydrogen bonds that hold the gel together break and reform in an orderly crystalline fashion. This is evident on the tongue as a gritty texture. Retrogradation is thus undesirable and reduces the quality of food. Examples include pudding held in the refrigerator for several days, or the harsh texture of bread after several days of storage. The crystalline aggregates of amylose can be eliminated by gently heating the food containing the starch. The heat energy will break the hydrogen bonds holding the amylose together and allow them to move in the gel again. The change is noticeable when stale bread is tightly covered and reheated. The heated bread is not harsh. Retrogradation is greatly accelerated by freezing. Thus, frozen products that require thickened sauces or gravies should be prepared with starch or flour from a waxy corn, rice, or sorghum. Starches can be modified chemically or physically. Instant pudding is an example of physically modified starch. It has been gelatinized and then dehydrated. The resulting powder is porous. It rapidly rehydrates when combined with cold liquid, so thickening occurs quickly. No heating is necessary. Starch-thickened mixtures can be prepared with dry or moist heat. When making gravy, starch is heated without any water added to the pan. The temperature rises rapidly, causing chemical degradation of the starch. Dry heat breaks the starch molecules into smaller fragments called dextrins. This process also causes a change in color, as in the browning of toast. Starch granules do not dissolve in cold water, but instead form a suspension. When heated, the granules swell, and the suspension becomes thicker and more translucent. This process is gelatinization. If the starch is not mixed well enough with the cold liquid, lumps form. Granules on the outside of the lumps swell as they take up water, whereas those on the inside may remain dry or swell only slightly. This decreases thickening because the starch inside is not available. To prevent lumping, mix starch with a fat, sugar, or a small amount of cold liquid. To make a white sauce, melt the fat and add flour. Note this is a roux, half fat, half flour. Then add the liquid. Note, to get a clear or shiny sauce, use cornstarch as the thickener. Flour gives an opaque product. If a white sauce tastes starchy and is grainy, it is due to uncooked flour. To make crystalline candies, sugar and liquid are heated to dissolve the sugar, then crystallized under conditions that produce small crystals. These have a smooth, creamy feeling. Ingredients used to help control crystal size are an acid, fat, and protein. A comparison between crystalline and non-crystalline candies follows. Fondant is a simple candy made from sugar and water. Fudge contains more substances that interfere with crystallization, so is creamier. Note the overrun in ice cream is the increase in volume that occurs when the recipe is agitated during the freezing process. Note it is measured by weight. Small crystals are essential for smooth ice cream. The more fat, the smaller the crystals, and the smoother the ice cream. Note, if you make ice cream with whipping cream instead of half and half, the product will be smoother because crystals are smaller. Grainy ice cream has large crystals due to too little fat. Melarine is imitation ice cream. The butter fat is replaced with vegetable oil. Gelatin changes a liquid into a solid. It also helps keep crystals small in candy and ice cream by interfering with the union of small crystals to make larger ones. Note, fresh and frozen pineapple have bromelain, an enzyme that breaks down protein and prevents gelation. Note, when coffee is heated above 203 degrees, tannin is extracted, causing a bitter taste. Information on the composition of food can be gathered from several sources, including the National Nutrient Data Bank. Additives are used in food processing to maintain or improve the quality of food. The FDA has authority over the ingredients. Note the additives that function as emulsifiers, preventing oil and water from separating. Note, glycerol monostearate acts as a humectant, retaining water, increasing the firmness of foods. Note, nitrites inhibit spores of Clostridium botulinum. Note, propionate inhibits mold. And ascorbic acid enhances the appearance by preventing browning. Functional foods provide more benefits than the basic nutritional benefits. Note the following examples. Fortified margarines may contain plant sterol and stanol esters, which reduce cholesterol levels. Grape juice and red wine have resveratrol, which reduces platelet aggregation. The omega-3 fatty acids in fatty fish reduce triglyceride levels. And fermented dairy products have probiotics, which support GI health. Phytochemicals are biologically active, naturally occurring chemical compounds in plant foods that act as natural defense for the plant. Possible benefits in humans include the prevention or treatment of chronic diseases like cancer and heart disease. They may act as blocking agents, preventing active carcinogens from reaching target tissue. They may reduce the risk of CHD by protecting LDL cholesterol from oxidation. Cruciferous vegetables have thiols, which contain sulfur. They are involved in the detoxification of carcinogens. Note, soy foods are rich in isoflavones and have been found to lower elevated cholesterol levels. Note, food synergy is the additive influence of foods and constituents which, when eaten, have a beneficial effect on health. This completes the food science section. Multicultural awareness is an important aspect of effective counseling. Evaluating our own beliefs and attitudes and becoming comfortable with differences between our customs and those of our clients is a valuable step. Ineffective communication in health care can result in incorrect diagnoses and non-compliance with treatment. Cultural communication styles vary among cultures: how you speak, your eye contact, how you greet people. Gestures, facial expressions, and postures are often the cause of confusion and misinterpretation. Good posture is an important sign of respect. Spatial relationships vary. The personal zone, when giving instructions or working closely with others, is 18 inches up to 4 feet. When working with clients who have limited English skills, use common terms and avoid slang. Always speak directly to the client. Pedagogy is the science of teaching children, where adults are authority figures. Andragogy is the method and practice of teaching adult learners, who are more problem-centered than subject-centered. Motivation is more internal than external. With lower-income adults, interests focus on costs and traditional food habits. The very poor are often short-term planners. When counseling adolescents, consider peer pressure as they attempt to make changes in everyday eating. Many elderly have decreased attention spans, so short sessions work best. Educational goals and objectives are based on an assessment of the client's knowledge and are set in accordance with the process of learning. Objectives in patient-centered counseling include increase awareness of diet-related risks, provide nutrition knowledge, enhance skills to promote long-term changes in intake, and increase confidence for making dietary changes. Objectives include what it is, who it is, when or the time frame, and a measure of the outcome. Consonance is a fit between the program and the expected outcomes based on the objectives. Steps in development of the educational plan are listed. The instructional media selected depends on the teaching goals, the size and learning style of the audience, the physical facility, and the equipment and time available. Budgeting is closely linked to planning. Consider project funding, expenditures to date, current estimated costs to complete the project, and the anticipated profit or loss. Periodic budget reviews help control resources and help adhere to the planning schedule. Program promotion informs and educates consumers about the existence of a product or service. Advertising includes purchasing print or electronic media. Targeted messages are developed for a carefully defined audience. Sales promotions are short-term incentives to encourage purchases, such as offering coupons for a service. Personal promotion includes formal and informal presentations, health fairs, cooking demonstrations, and media interviews. They can be tailored to fit individual or group needs. Direct contact provides positive feedback to the listener. And public relations is an organized effort to promote a favorable image through news coverage or goodwill. There are 3 domains of learning. Cognitive learning is the acquisition of knowledge, factual information. Affective learning helps develop sound attitudes and values about nutrition. And psychomotor learning is the acquisition of muscular skills like exercises. Each has a hierarchy from the simple to the complex. Objectives at the lower level must be mastered before more complex learning can take place. Is the level of learning appropriate based on the group's prior learning and present ability? The design procedure is used to plan theory-based nutrition education. The steps are: decide behavior change goals, explore determinants of change, select the theory you will use, indicate general objectives, generate plans, and develop the evaluation plan. Behavior modification techniques are based on a cause and effect explanation of behavior. Therapy can focus on the cues, the behavior itself, or the consequences of the behavior. An antecedent is an event or environment that triggers a specific behavior or response, like watching a TV commercial advertising French fries. One method is positive reinforcement, which encourages the repetition of a given behavior. An example is offering praise. Avoidance learning is where you learn to avoid future criticism by improving future performance. Extinction is designed to reduce undesired behavior. This is the absence of reinforcement following undesired behavior. Ignore the behavior and it will become extinct. In the stages of change model of counseling, behavior involves a series of stages. Determine the client's stage to assess his readiness to change. The stages include pre-contemplation, where he is unaware or not interested in making a change. In contemplation, he is thinking about making a change. In preparation, he decides to change and plans the change. In the action phase, he tries to make the change. And in the maintenance phase, he has sustained the change for 6 months or longer. Tailoring intervention to their stage of change is more effective. The health belief model was developed to explain why people, especially those at high risk, fail to participate in programs designed to detect or prevent disease. A person must first perceive the severity and their susceptibility to the threat for the threat to be a behavior motivating factor. The diffusion of innovation theory describes how an innovation, an idea, or a behavior spreads through a group. People fall into several categories, beginning with the innovators, who adopt an idea readily, usually without input from others, down to the laggards, the last to adopt the idea. Tailor your intervention to where they are in this process. Implementation of the educational plan requires strong communication skills. Motivation eases transition to new behaviors. The key is success and showing support of the learner. Try to involve the learner in an active way. For application of the information and active involvement of the learner permits the greatest retention. Establish rapport with the client. Encourage him to express fears and concerns about impending changes. Discuss problems descriptively rather than evaluatively, which means don't be judgmental. Offer alternatives provisionally rather than dogmatically. Offer him options. Be problem-oriented rather than manipulative. Be straightforward and authentic. Be empathetic rather than neutral. Put yourself in their shoes. This allows you to respond without giving advice. You focus instead on their need to talk and express feelings and concerns. Your message should be clear, complete, concise, concrete, and correct. Counselors need to develop strong listening responses. Clarification is where you ask him to clarify his comments, to make them clear. Active or reflective listening is where you paraphrase or repeat back what was said, hoping that will encourage him to offer additional information. A legitimation statement acknowledges that there was a reason for a behavior, indicating that the response from the client was legitimate. Feedback lets you know what he knows and what he understands about what you are saying. The environmental setting is also important. There should be a feeling of openness. Maintain good eye contact and always respect his confidence. The method of instruction is based on the size of the group and the educational and motivational aspects of the group members. Small group discussion is beneficial in a clinical setting when you have 3 to 5 people with similar needs. When working with a group dynamics must be considered. The skills to develop as a group leader are listed. Leaders must make sure everyone participates in the discussion. The negotiation is a type of group process. Plan the strategy in advance. Know what you are willing to accept as a bottom line. Synergy refers to a theory that the group's product, the group's decision, is superior to what the most resourceful individual within the group could have produced by working alone. The dietary interview requires strong listening and verbal communication skills. Begin by collecting background information on the client, from which you establish objectives for the interview. The first step when you are facing the client is to build rapport with him. Then conduct the interview using open-ended, non-judgmental questions. Open-ended questions give the client freedom in responding and give you a chance to listen and observe. Closed questions are more restrictive. They limit answers. Primary questions introduce new topics. Secondary questions are follow-up questions. Neutral questions are preferred. They do not reveal your bias. Leading questions reveal your bias. When you have adequate information, initiate closing. The client's nonverbal communication can affect the direction of the interview. Counselors should look for these signals of unspoken feelings. Kinesics refer to a variety of physical behaviors. Paralinguistics refers to how he delivers his message to you. And proxemics involves his personal space. The ethical principle of autonomy tells us to respect one's right to self-determine a course of action and independent decision-making. Please review the examples of counselors' responses to the client. With an evaluation response, you make a judgment about his feelings, leading to the offering of advice. This is not a problem-solving method and is seldom helpful. With a hostile response, you may antagonize or humiliate the client. The reassuring response may make it difficult to solve the client's problem or even discuss it further. The client is prevented from working through his feelings. In the probing response, you attempt to clarify or gain more information. The understanding response is one of the best ways to respond. You try to recreate their message in your own frame of reference. This may lead to more client cooperation. It helps him feel accepted and safe in expressing his feelings. One counseling technique is cognitive behavior therapy. This focuses on identifying behaviors and thoughts that have a negative impact on desired behaviors and goals. You then apply strategies to change those behaviors. Motivational interviewing helps clients recognize and begin to resolve their concerns and problems. The goal is to increase motivation so they are able to express the rationale for the changes that need to be made. People make behavioral changes only when they are ready to change. Please note the MI principles as listed. Express empathy. Develop discrepancy between where he is and where he wants to be. Avoid arguments and confrontation. Roll with resistance. Acknowledge his reluctance to change and ambivalence. Offer new information or alternatives to consider. And support self-efficacy by reinforcing hope and optimism. Written communication is formal and authoritative. It is interpreted more accurately and used when a record is required. When creating written materials, note, keep the reading level around the 8th grade for the general population and the 6th grade for audiences of lower literacy abilities. Email and texting are examples of formal communication. A procedure for determining readability is the SMOG index, which gives the grade level of written text. This is based on the average number of polysyllabic words in a block of text. Oral communication is more personal. It encourages two-way communication, but poor listening skills are a critical barrier to its effectiveness. Develop media partnerships with local television and radio stations. This extends your reach to audiences that may be out of reach due to financial reasons. Introduce the campaign to the community with kickoff events, like a press conference at a farmer's market or a grocery store. Develop 2 to 4 key messages to serve as a focus. Then, sustain ongoing media relationships with a few key reporters who cover food or health issues and offer to serve as resource for them. We must evaluate each step in the educational process. Note, formative evaluation is made during the course of education. It helps pinpoint the parts mastered and parts not mastered, and allows for revision of plans and methods as you are teaching. It answers the question, how should we do it? The client must be involved in formative evaluation. Examples include the focus group and the pretest. Note, summative evaluation is designed at the planning stage, but conducted at the end of learning. It is considered final. The purpose may be grading or evaluation of progress. Did we achieve what we planned? The post-test is summative. Evaluation strategies are developed once objectives are written. Assess the learner and evaluate your assessment. Develop and evaluate the plan. Implement and evaluate the education session. The formal objective test is not well suited for the clinic or community setting. The performance test does work well. The client is asked to complete a task based on the learning objectives. Evaluation of the effectiveness of the educational plan includes the items listed. Documentation of employee education and training is essential. The use of an orientation checklist is helpful in ensuring that everything the employee needs to know has been communicated to him. Records should be kept on file, noting the date and content of ongoing training sessions, such as in-service programs, and off-the-job experiences, such as continuing education. Nutritional informatics is the intersection between nutrition, information, and technology. It is the use of technology in spreading information. Please note the acronyms that follow. Healthcare providers use electronic health records to enter, store, retrieve, and manage information related to health care. HIPAA maintains privacy of protected health information. This includes the patient's rights to their own health information, privacy, and confidentiality. Patients must be notified if their medical information is to be shared outside of the care process or if protected information is to be shared. The patient-centered medical home focuses on the relationship between the patient and their personal physician, who takes responsibility for all aspects of their health care. The RDN should be considered part of the medical home treatment plan. Telehealth services is the use of electronic information and technologies to support long-distance clinical health care and patient and professional education. Examples are listed. Home telehealth services include checking on symptoms and measuring vital signs in the home and health coaching. Telenutrition is where the RDN uses electronic information and technologies to implement the nutrition care process with clients at a remote location within provisions of their state license as applicable. Medicare Part B allows some services provided by RDNs to be offered via telehealth, including MNT and diabetes self-management training. Health coaching uses behavior change models and motivational interviewing. It often involves some form of telehealth. The Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics Health Informatics Infrastructure tracks nutrition care outcomes and advances evidence-based nutrition practice research. Altmetrics is the presentation of the amount of activity from Twitter, Facebook, science blogs, mainstream news, and other sources over time. Note the list of current food and nutrient analysis software programs and databases, and the examples of food and nutrition management software. Legislation is the interaction between the legislative, executive, and judiciary branches. The legislative branch may introduce and enact a law. The executive branch may veto legislation or sign it into law. And the judiciary may discard a law if it considers it in violation of a person's basic rights and freedoms. Legislation enters as a bill or a resolution. The bill is sent to committees which schedule public hearings where testimony is taken from the sponsor of the bill. Nutritionists can present their views here or in earlier planning stages. The committee revises the bill during a markup session and puts it into final form. If it is approved, it is sent to the Rules Committee for debate. It needs approval from both houses of Congress and the President. Differences between the two houses are worked out in a joint House-Senate conference committee, ultimately passing a reconciliation bill. Note, then appropriations bills must be passed to provide funding. Regulations interpret and operate the law. They carry the force of a law, but are easier to change. Regulations are written by staff members of the agencies charged with enforcing them. Next are the enforcement agencies that carry out the law. The FTC regulates the content of food advertisements. It enforces truth in labeling and challenges product claims when the product crosses state lines. The FDA ensures safety of some domestic and imported food products. The FCC licenses radio and television services. Of all the resources available to follow what is happening with legislation, the Federal Register is most helpful to us. It lists all the changes made in USDA food programs. Nutritionists serve as advocates, pleading the cause of a group. To be an advocate, know the facts and arguments for and against the issue. Be realistic. Advocacy usually results in a compromise. Lobbying refers to activities aimed at influencing public officials and legislators. Public policy advocacy and legislation that affects nutrition education programs includes the Child Nutrition Reauthorization Bill, the Farm Bill, and the Older Americans Act. The next section covers research applications. Research begins by identifying a relevant and important topic and reviewing the literature on that topic. Then develop the research question which leads to a hypothesis, which is a prediction of a relationship. The null hypothesis states there is no relationship in the population of data. Any differences seen are a result of sampling error. Then prepare the protocol, organize methods and materials, collect and analyze the data, study the results, and make decisions. Meta-analysis is a formal, defined system that combines the results of numerous small studies to increase the strength of belief in the observed effect. Studies are of a similar design, have defined inclusion and exclusion criteria, and are published peer-review studies. Quorum has proposed quality standards for the review and monitoring of systematic reviews and meta-analysis of randomized trials. Companion standards that suggest common evaluation criteria for clinical trials are listed. The research report or manuscript contains an abstract, a condensation of the final report. The abstract appears first under the title. Components of the report are listed. Note, in the results section, specific lab, clinical, objective, or subjective findings are noted. But it is in the discussion section where you interpret the results. And the implication section is where you describe how the information might be applied in practice. Research can be broadly defined as descriptive or analytical. Descriptive research describes the state of nature at a point in time. It helps you generate a hypothesis as to what determines a condition or disease. It will establish associations among factors, but does not allow causal relationships to be determined. Descriptive research includes the qualitative study, case studies, surveys, and correlation studies. Note, correlation or ecological studies compare the frequency of events or disease rates in different populations with the per capita consumption of certain dietary factors, such as the correlation between fish consumption and breast cancer incidence. Analytical research tests your hypothesis and allows causal associations to be determined. An example is the experimental model, which uses both experimental and control groups. Randomization is dividing people into treatment or control groups without bias. Note, the experimental group receives the program or treatment. The control group does not, but may receive a placebo, which gives the aura but not the substance of a service. The placebo removes the possibility of the Hawthorne effect, a positive response due to special attention that participants receive. Your program is successful if the experimental group has improved more than the control group. In clinical nutrition studies, the randomized clinical trial with a comparison placebo control group is the gold standard. This is considered the best for evaluating medical treatments and intervention with one or more treatments. Note, in the parallel design, participants are randomly assigned to a particular treatment group and remain on that treatment throughout the study. In a crossover design, each participant serves as his own control. In a two-period crossover design, each would receive either intervention or control, A or B, in the first period, and the alternate treatment, A or B, in the second period. A major advantage in the crossover design is that variability is reduced, because the measured effect of the intervention is the difference in that participant's response to the intervention and control. This decrease in variance allows use of a smaller sample size. Crossover designs are generally longer, but each is exposed to all treatments. A quasi-experimental design is the time series method. Measurements are taken before and after your program to see whether there has been a noteworthy change. A cohort is a group whose members have something in common. Cohorts of healthy people are followed through time to see if they develop a specific disease. These are sometimes called incidence studies because they look at the frequency of new cases of a disease. They are carried out over time and are prospective. Case control studies focus on a specific disease. Those with the disease are compared with the group without the disease, but otherwise similar in characteristics. Both groups recall past behaviors to study how the groups differ. Cross-sectional studies are a one-time data collection. They are sometimes called prevalence studies because they look at all of the cases of a specific disease among a group of people. Note, they are a snapshot look at one point in time. They describe current, not past or future events. Note, the Institutional Review Board is a committee established to review and approve research involving human subjects to ensure it is conducted within all ethical and federal guidelines. Next, we will look at the tests that test your test. Did you prove what you think you have proven? Relevance of validity looks at the ability to measure what it intends to measure. Internal validity tests whether the difference between the two groups is real. External validity tests whether or not a generalization can be made from the study to a larger population. Analysis of variance evaluates the validity of your test. It asks whether the difference between samples is a reliable one that would be repeated. Note, this is used when several products compete against one another. It answers the question, are there significant differences anywhere among the samples? Reliability evaluates the consistency or reproducibility of test results. You might give the test, then retest later. Are results similar? Precision is a measure of the reliability of the test. Sensitivity and specificity tests are used if the protocol involves screening for a particular condition. It evaluates the cutoff value being used. Variables in research may have different values from observation to observation. Nominal, non-ordered variables are those that fit into a category with no special order. Rank order ordinal scale variables are observations compared with each other and put in order, perhaps from best to worst. Note, the dependent variable is the outcome. The independent variable is what you manipulate in the study. Treatments for diseases are independent variables. Probability sampling uses randomization. Statistics help us evaluate the data collected during research. Data distributions can be evaluated with measures of central tendency, looking at the center of the mass of data. Note, there are 3 measures of central tendency: the mean, the median, and the mode. The arithmetic mean is the simple average of all observations. Add them together and divide by the number of numbers. The median is the midpoint. To determine the median, arrange the observations from low to high. Count the number of values. The median is the value at the midpoint. If there is an odd number of numbers, the median will be the exact center. If there is an even number of numbers, the median is the average of the 2 numbers closest to the center. The mode is the most frequently occurring value. It is the prediction most likely to be correct. Please review the examples. Measures of dispersion show how values are distributed about the mean. The range is the difference between the lowest and highest values in the distribution. The standard deviation is the most significant measure of dispersion. Note, 68% of all observations in a normal distribution lie within 1 standard deviation of the mean. Please review the example. Statistics also show the existence of relationships within data called correlations. This linear correlation coefficient, noted by the small letter r, measures the degree to which the points in a scatter diagram cluster about a straight line. The value of r is always between -1 and 1. r equals 1 when all points lie exactly on a straight line with a positive slope. r equals -1 when all points lie on a straight line with a negative slope. The closer r is to 1 or -1, the closer the points tend to cluster about the line, and the stronger the degree of relationship. The closer r is to 0, the more dispersed the points will be from the line. If r equals 0, there is no linear relationship. Please review the examples. Clinical significance has 3 features. It has a change or difference in outcomes that somebody cares about. The outcome must be relevant for patient care, public health, or the field of study. And the change must be statistically significant, not due to chance. The p-value evaluates the level of significance of your test results. The lower the p-value, the higher the significance. A p-value less than or equal to 0.05 indicates a significant difference, so results are reliable. A p-value greater than 0.05 indicates there is not a very significant difference, so results are not reliable. Please review the example. Other terms used in research are listed and defined. Please note the double-blind study and the difference between mortality and morbidity. Note, inferential statistics are techniques that allow conclusions to extend beyond an immediate data set. What is the probability that your results can be applied to a larger group? The pilot study is a scaled-down version of the larger investigation. It is run to determine whether the clinical trial as planned is feasible. Are the goals realistic and attainable? Note, it includes every step in the study, but done on a small test group. Will the study plan work? The focus group is a method of attaining information about a target group. Gather a small number of people together to talk about their beliefs, opinions, attitudes, and problems. This contributes attitudinal data to your study. The t-test tests the significance between the means of two different populations. It tests the null against the alternative hypothesis. Evidence-based guidelines are developed by conducting a systematic review and then using the conclusion of the review to develop practice-based guidelines. Subject matter experts and trained analysts summarize best available evidence. A&D's Evidence Analysis Library can assist in answering questions that may arise during the provision of nutrition care. This domain continues on the next CD.